Hey, welcome in everybody to the Flagship Podcast. We are live on draft day. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by the managing editor of Horns247, Taylor Estes. And you are listening to the Flagship Podcast. We welcome you in. It is a Thursday. It's NFL Draft Day. And Taylor, we got a lot to get into. Obviously, the talking season for Steve Sarkisian has begun.
Yeah,
he's on the barnstorming circuit talking about the Texas Longhorns. I was in Houston yesterday for the kickoff of talking season, and Steve Sarkisian had let's just say he's bullish on the Longhorns. We will definitely get to that, and Arch Manning. Zero NIL dollars. We'll get into that. His assessment of his quarterback situation. But let's start with Bijan Robinson, because let's be honest, this podcast will be outdated by the time, most people listen to it, since the draft is tonight.
listen back to it. The live viewers will get it live, but listen back to it. Yeah.
That's right. We have live viewers right now. In fact, they're already commenting. Someone wants to know who the second team punter is. Love that, Drew. But this is embarrassing for Texas. And thanks to Bijan Robinson, this embarrassing factoid is going to end. But Texas has not had an offensive player selected in the first round of the NFL draft since Vince Young went number 3 overall in 2006. Taylor, that's 17 years.
Yeah. Basically, when Bijan Robinson was 4 years old, that was the last time that Texas had a first round pick on offense in the NFL draft. And it's wild to think that way. I mean, I've known this, we've talked about this over the years in covering Texas. But when I've been pre-writing a lot of the articles for Bijan when he does get drafted, it still blows my mind, Chip, that Texas football could be in a position to where not a single offensive player since that Longhorn legend Vince Young, made Texas football really a household name nationwide, if not worldwide, honestly, with that game in the 2005 BCS National Championship. He goes on to be the first round draft pick. And then it's like, if you want to know what's happened to Texas football since those glory years, there you go. I mean, it's wild to me. I mean, there have been a couple of guys, Sam Cosmi and Connor Williams were kind of on the fringe offensive players that could go in the first round. They didn't. They went early in the second round. But it's just so insane to me that a place like the University of Texas has not had an offensive player drafted in the first round. But let's be honest, though, you went from one Longhorn legend to the next. That's going to be the next one that is drafted, because even though, maybe the awards, the accolades maybe weren't there at Texas, Bijan Robinson is without a doubt a generational type of talent. A lot of NFL draft experts have said that he is a top, 5 prospect overall, regardless of position. NFL doesn't value running backs as much when it comes to draft picks. So his draft pick, spot is not going to reflect how elite of a talent it is. But this is just crazy to me, Chip. I mean, your thoughts on you've covered Texas every year since then. Your thoughts on the fact that it's been that long?
Yeah, well, thanks to Connor Williams, he ended another embarrassing drought for Texas. Yeah. The Longhorns did not have an offensive lineman drafted in 7 rounds of the NFL draft from 2008 to 2018. Connor Williams ended that drought. That's embarrassing beyond belief. And if you want to know why Texas has been out at sea on a dinghy waiting for a freighter to pass by and bring them back to college football relevance, those are a couple of the reasons. But back to Bijan Robinson, this guy, Taylor, I mean, I'll just start with the fact that Gary Patterson, former TCU head coach, special assistant at Texas, assisting the defense last year, told me that Bijan Robinson reminds him of LaDainian Tomlinson, former Horned Frog LaDainian Tomlinson, who is number 7 rushing all time in NFL history, a Pro Football Hall of Famer, by the way, and number 3 among running backs in receptions in NFL history. And that's why Gary Patterson thinks Bijan Robinson is a good comparison to LaDainian Tomlinson, because he thinks that Bijan Robinson is not only a gifted runner, but has the hands that LaDainian Tomlinson had, to be just a versatile nightmare for opponents. And Bijan's he's built a little different than LaDainian. He's just a little thicker. And so, that contact balance that Bijan Robinson has up to this point in his career has been off the charts. I mean, the scouts I've talked to have said that's what impresses you the most, that side tackles don't bring him down, that he usually doesn't go down on first contact, and has the nimble feet to make spin moves and not take the big hit that can tend to end a running back's career prematurely. You look at the great backs at Texas, Ricky Williams, Cedric Benson, God rest his soul. Earl Campbell, Priest Holmes, Jamal Charles, and Bijan Robinson has a chance to have a better pro career than all those guys. Now, he finished behind Ricky Williams, Cedric Benson, and Earl Campbell as far as rushing at Texas, but he only played 3 seasons. Those 3 backs I just mentioned played 4. He's really probably more of a comp for Jamal Charles, who played only 3 seasons. And of course, Bijan passed Jamal Charles this last season to get into that number 4 rushing spot. And Jamal Charles is a guy who could catch the football and had a prolific career. He's the all-time leading rusher for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, when you're talking about Bijan Robinson, I think you're right. I mean, we get a little, ahead of ourselves sometimes when we say he's a transcendent talent, he's a generational talent, but I think he is. And I think you're right. So it's going to be fun. Now, you got to be blessed with health. You got to be blessed with longevity, probably the same thing as health. But it also helps to be on a team that has some consistency, that has some, foundational strength. You look at guys like Emmitt Smith and, Walter Payton, LaDainian Tomlinson, who spent most of his career with the then San Diego Chargers. Emmitt Smith, his whole career not his whole career, but most of his career with a really talented Dallas Cowboys team that valued the running game and a play action passing game. And so that's going to be a huge part of it. And that's going to be fun to watch because, Ezekiel Elliott was a high draft pick for the Cowboys, and Taylor, 7 years into his NFL career, people are saying he's done. And that's, he was the 4th pick overall. That can happen. Now, I think Bijan is a little bit more disciplined in the way that he approaches his life, his taking care of his body. And that's a lot to say as a kid, 3 years coming out of college, than Ezekiel Elliott. I think Ezekiel Elliott has enjoyed his life as an NFL star, and it takes a lot of discipline. The college coaches, Steve Sarkisian talks all the time, be a professional in college, the way you treat your body, the way you prepare. Jordan Whittington has talked about it, going from eating pints of ice cream a night to now going in to meet with the trainer hours ahead of practice to get all of his stretching in and to take care of his body to make sure that he's healthy and on the field. And I think Bijan Robinson is that kind of guy. So we'll see, but he also represents a big name and a shiny emblem for Texas in recruiting, Taylor. We know that recruits only remember the last 5 minutes. And so having a guy like Bijan Robinson going into the NFL with a chance to become a star will certainly help Texas in recruiting and end that negative recruiting that don't go play offense at Texas. Those guys don't get drafted.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And Sark did it this is a good, not saying that Sark did it. Obviously, Tom Herman and his staff did recruit Bijan Robinson. However, this is a good mark to add to Sark's list. I mean, this is a short period of time that he's been at Texas, and he already will have a first round draft pick to point to. Previous coaches at Texas have had to kind of point back to prior issues that they're trying to correct when they're in the recruiting, in a recruit's house or talking about developing them into potential first round draft picks. This is something Sark can now point to. And when you talk about, I saw there's a question here from CTE11, any chance Bijan drops to the Cowboys? In mentioning Ezekiel Elliott, Chip, I think that's one of the reasons why some NFL draft, GMs or NFL, GMs, front office people have kind of devalued the running back position because of what you said about Ezekiel Elliott. Now, obviously, the Cowboys do not have Ezekiel Elliott now. And I would say to CTE11, if Bijan Robinson at number 26 is available to the Cowboys and they don't pick him, I would say if you're a Cowboys fan, just jump out the window at that point. I mean, my goodness, because if you get a guy like Bijan Robinson, where all of these NFL, insiders, analysts, even front office GMs know that he is one of the top 5 best overall prospects in this draft, regardless of position. If somehow he slides to 26 and it's a guy who does not have off the field issues that would lead to anything like that, doesn't have injury history, is very minimally used, never carried the ball for more than, I think he said he never had 20 carries even in high school. Took him, only a few games at Texas with 20 carries. If that's on the board at 26 and Jerry Jones doesn't swipe him up, then you might need a mental health check. No, I mean, he's not going to be on the board. Right?
I'm worried he's going to go to well, anyway, this, again, a lot of people will be hearing this after the draft, but there's no chance that he's there at 26. He'll be gone in the top 10. And of course, if he ends up with the Philadelphia Eagles, Cowboys fans are going to be sick to their stomach.
Yeah. Well, and Bijan did come out yesterday. I believe it was on Wednesday. I think it was this week. Somebody, he was in an interview and someone asked him about the, I think the quarterback he wanted to play with.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts.
He's like, Jalen Hurts. So
he's
only just
talking.
feeding the fans. So that
he's sweet talking the Eagles. There's no question about it. I mean, if he goes to the Eagles, Taylor, he could be playing for a Super Bowl next year. The running back from Texas, the Cowboys need to focus on is Roschon Johnson.
Yeah.
There's your thunder to Tony Pollard's lightning, and a guy who will help you in every way, special teams, locker room. He's going to be a 10-year NFL player. Just write it down. And that's the guy the Cowboys need to draft as the heir apparent to Ezekiel Elliott. They've franchised Tony Pollard. Great. No problem there. But Roschon Johnson, you're not going to get a better professional and a guy who's really still scratching the surface as a running back after moving from quarterback his freshman year at Texas. So there's my 2 cents on the Cowboys, Taylor. Anything else on Bijan?
No, I mean, we've talked at length. I think anybody that has watched or listened to the Flagship podcast knows how highly we think of Bijan Robinson, both as a talent, obviously an elite talent, and also the way he carried himself off the field. Those are little things that we don't necessarily talk about when we talk about players, because we see one side and we don't see them a lot of times in their personal life. But all stories about Bijan Robinson are all the same. And it's all that if there was, it's what Jeremy Hill said prior to the 2022 football season. If all players in the NFL were the same type of off-field character that Bijan Robinson was, there would never be off the field issues in the NFL, because that's the type of kid he is. So I hope he goes as high as possible. I hope he enters the top 10. I would love to see that, just because, I think he's somebody who could answer and provide a spark both as a running back, kind of like a Christian McCaffrey, I would say a little bit, and not just as an elite running back, but elite with the ball in his hands in the passing game. You can use him in a variety of ways. I mean, somebody's going to get a steal, I would say, for this type of talent.
Yeah, and he's, like I say, he's constructed differently. He's got thickness to him that is going to help him. I mean, look, Adrian Peterson is a top 5 rusher all time in the NFL, and having that bigger body, that muscular thickness, it matters at the running back position. Bijan Robinson has it, and he's got the nimble feet to avoid taking the big hit. If he just doesn't try to hurdle someone, Taylor, and then get scorpioned like he did his freshman year at Texas Tech, I think this guy has a chance to have a long and healthy career, and it's going to be really fun to watch. He's going to be a guy. He already is a guy. I mean, he's already with USAA. The guy's got deals coming out of his deals because he's worth listening to. He's worth following. He's worth, buying the products that he endorses. I bought Bijan Mustardson. It took a month to arrive, when I ordered it, and I'll buy more because it's got that nice little horseradish to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I still don't get the writing that he did on the inside of the carton, but it's hilarious and I love it. It's kind of keep Austin weird. But anyway.
Well, and if he can still keep avoiding tackles, I mean, he led the country with 113 missed tackles forced last season. That only adds to his longevity as a running back, and that goes to show that he hasn't been hit too many times. He's not battered and bruised as with how much he contributed to the Texas offense. This is not a guy who's the yardage is showing in his body or anything like that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, Steve Sarkisian has started talking season, so he kicked things off at the Touchdown Club of Houston on Wednesday, and I went down to the Bayou Event Center, and Steve Sarkisian is, talking openly, publicly about how his players expect to win a Big 12 championship this season. He must have mentioned it 5 times in his 45 minutes of talking to the Touchdown Club of Houston. Talked about how Texas won the conference championship in their final year of the Southwest Conference before going to the Big 12, and how, they'd like to do that again in their final year of the Big 12 before going to the SEC. And then the very final question of the luncheon was, how about an over-under on wins for the season? And Sark said, you tell me, I feel good about it. So Taylor, Steve Sarkisian, I love that he has come in with a championship mentality. I've said before here on the Flagship Podcast that, he was brought in to match wits with Lincoln Riley, but Sark was telling people privately, we're going to build this program in the image of the SEC, and he's done it with the behemoth linemen. He talked about that. Talked about how the smallest of his linemen are, that he recruited this past year were 350 and 6'7", and so he's got confidence. And if that's the way he's talking to his team, and he says we've got to be intentional to be able to be a champion, then, and that they've got to be the hunters and not the hunted, because you can't sneak up on anybody anymore. And I like it.
I do too. And I think he is, he's saying a lot of the things that Tom Herman said, I think, going into the 2020 season before COVID. Now, the difference is with Steve Sarkisian, I say that, and Texas fans are probably like, what are you talking about? Let's just hear me out. The difference with Steve Sarkisian is he has had the same message as what Tom Herman came into, but it's been more relatable, and it's been something that players buy into, not something that players are like, kind of dislike you because you're so over the top with it. He's been really intentional with the way he has built this culture, built this program, built this roster. And at the end of the day, the way he's building the roster is something that can sustain not just in the SEC, but it's a long-term sustainable type of plan, as so long as they can get the needs that they do have. The fact that they have this different, I mean, you look at this Texas team, Chip, the offensive line and defensive line specifically, compared to, some of the other coaches we've seen, even in Mac Brown's time, it is night and day difference. They don't look like the same offensive line. They don't look like the same defensive line. I mean, my goodness, I saw Tavondre Sweat post a picture of himself on Instagram. I think it was last week, and he's in front of this big truck. I don't know what type of truck it is, but this is a not normal size truck, lifted and everything. And I looked at it and I was like, my God, he fills up more than like a third of the front of this massive grill. That's like a huge truck. It's just totally different, their way that they are building this roster. And I think, as we've said before on the Flagship Podcast, this is one of the only times I feel like in my career, you've said one of the few times, in recent years covering Texas, that we feel that it's not unfair for us to say that this is a Big 12 title team or bust, or type of year or bust for Steve Sarkisian, because of the way they are building this roster and, trying to make it sustainable for the future. I like hearing him be confident too, though, because the one thing we haven't seen with Steve Sarkisian is too much coach speak. His coach speak is him not saying much, or avoiding answering a question, or, spinning it in a different way. Like, obviously we're, excited for the future, but we've got like there's always been some sort of caveat, I think, when he gets asked some tough questions. And I feel like he's approaching it head on. And it's hard for me to think that that's coach speak right now, Chip. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I mean, it just seems legit. I don't think he'd say it if he didn't truly feel it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Sarkisian's been, for in a world of coach speak, I think he's been pretty on the level. And look, you've got, if the coach doesn't believe it, it's hard for the players to believe it. And it was always interesting to me that Mac Brown would always talk about 10-win seasons, and Bob Stoops always talked about championships.
Yeah.
And when you talk about championships, it's like our buddy Sean Adams used to say, you get what you demand. You don't get what you earn. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you demand. And if the coach is talking in terms of being intentional, and you're going to have to do all the little things, and you're going to have to be extra disciplined, because championships don't come easy. And that's where this team's mindset is, then, okay, I'm all in, because it's been a minute. It's been a minute. Like you said, Tom Herman had that kind of Urban Meyer, not wannabe, but clone, Urban Meyer clone mentality, where you're going to use fear as a motivating, factor, which even Urban Meyer has said he doesn't think works in the age of the transfer portal. And that's why he went to the NFL and hasn't returned to college coaching. That, the transfer portal has changed the game. And Steve Sarkisian addressed the transfer portal yesterday, Taylor. He said, the one thing I have to draw the line on is, if you tell me you're going into the portal, you're never coming back, because I can't have guys testing the waters and checking to see who else is interested, and maybe there's a better spot somewhere else. You tell me you're going into the portal, you're done. So, I mean, the coaches are trying to manage their rosters. They're trying to have certainty in, how many players they have and in what positions.
I mean, I saw some backlash that he got for saying that, 'cause I think he said it on an interview, like a show prior to the speaking event. on Wednesday, there were some people that were saying, you got a second chance in life, with him going to rehab and all of that. I mean, I personally think it's like totally different, right? Like, I think that's what coaches have to do, because it's a choice to enter the transfer portal. It's not like they're forcing kids into the transfer portal and then saying, sorry, you can't come back type of thing. It's if a player really wants to test the waters and goes to the lengths of entering his name into the portal and thinking that there's greener, the grass is greener on the other side, it's like, that's great. Best of luck to you, but you're not coming back, because what type of culture is that? What type of example is that setting? What type of culture is that bringing in back into the locker room? To me, it almost is similar to the culture that Steve Sarkisian basically had to work over a year to beat out of these players, because it was just such a not all in type of team mentality. I feel like that's only going to continue if coaches allow players to enter the transfer portal and then come back. So that's a terrible example. I don't know why he was getting backlash. I was like, that's should be the standard. I mean, you can't just, if in a marriage, you can't just be like, hey, I'm going to go test the waters and maybe go date some other people just to see if I can find something better. But you need to be here for me in case I want to come back.
Yeah.
Is that normal? No.
So. No. And if you're, if you have any kind of relationship with your coach, you're going to go to him and talk to him about it ahead of time. And then maybe the coach says, hey, think about this before you do it. Kind of the Arterio Morris situation with Texas basketball. Arterio Morris kind of just went and got in the portal and didn't really go to the coaching staff and talk to him about it. And the Texas coaching staff is like, okay, good luck, and I don't know how it's working for Arterio. Honestly, I think there was one school he thought he would end up at, and they're not pulling the trigger, and yet anyway. And it's so, as a student athlete, you got to have a good relationship with your coach. You got to be able to go to them and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, and have a conversation. If you don't, then how are they going to have sympathy for you?
Yeah.
How are they going to have sympathy for you if you don't have the, Sarkisian talks all the time about how after spring, after, the winter conditioning, he's always checking in with players, telling them what they need to work on and where he sees them in the program at that particular time, and how much work it's going to take to get ahead of that guy and that guy. And if they don't want to do that, or they don't see it in their future, then they get in the transfer portal and move on. It's interesting. Deion Sanders is getting criticism right now for allegedly, according to reports, telling players who were not thinking about transferring to get into the portal and transfer. And that's tough. That's a tough way to go about things.
Especially in Deion's case he's not really proven himself as an FBS head coach, and Colorado's not some powerhouse that's going to easily bring tons of other guys in. I mean, that's Deion may be able to get away with that message now and sell, Coach Prime, but if that doesn't work for a few years, he's not going to be Coach Prime at Colorado. I'd say that, and so, and only like a Deion could probably do that. Normal coaches can't do that, I don't think.
Right. I will never doubt Deion because of his unbelievable abilities as a player and the amount of confidence he has. But you got to be careful. It cuts both ways, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so, Sarkisian mentioned that he probably the story that's getting the most attention from the comments that Sarkisian made in front of the Touchdown Club of Houston came when a person in the audience asked, so how much NIL money did Arch Manning cost us? And Sark said, 0. You want a story on this? I got it. And he proceeded to talk about how, Arch, he got a text. Sarkisian got a text from Cooper Manning, Arch's dad, shortly after Arch committed, as Sarkisian said, out of the blue one morning at 9 a.m., he got a text from Cooper Manning shortly thereafter that said, let this be, a message to the other kids you're recruiting that Arch is picking Texas because he loves Texas and not because of NIL. And then Sarkisian said that Arch's grandfather, Archie Manning, the former Ole Miss legendary quarterback, Saints quarterback, said that Arch shouldn't take any NIL money until he becomes a player, a starter. And so, it's an old school way of looking at things. Obviously, the Mannings are not hurting.
Yeah.
But interesting stuff, because everyone talks about the NIL valuations of certain players, and Arch Manning has like a $3 million NIL valuation. And it wasn't part of, according to Steve Sarkisian, it was zero part of the recruitment. So,
yeah.
interesting.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, because I've seen a lot of headlines. I mean, first of all, Sark made the right decision in saying it cost us zero NIL dollars, because schools are not supposed to pay NIL dollars to prospects. I understand where, the question was going, but Chip, how many times did we talk about, whether it was on the Flagship Podcast or away from it, just having conversations of laughing at these type of comments that we would see, oh, how much is Texas going to buy Arch Manning for? He's going to go wherever the highest, or to the highest bidder. Then he commits to Texas. And that's what all of the other fan base, oh, Texas won the bidding war. And it's do y'all think the Manning family needs money? Let's just truly look at this person. Normally, yes, I understand that this could be a very common storyline when it comes to top rated recruits. It happened to Quinn Ewers. I mean, my goodness, when he was at Texas, or committed to Texas, and ended up going to Ohio State. This is the Manning family, the most legendary family in all of college football, NFL football. I mean, we are talking about multi-millionaires. And we're going to say that Arch Manning's going to go to the place that is the highest bidder. No, the whole thing was always about him going where he felt that he was going to be developed the best and not have to be the savior early on in his career. That's why he chose Texas. I know everyone wants to say that we were lying, or, that's the Texas spin on things. No, that's not the Texas spin on things. That is the truth of the situation there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Sark has said on more than one occasion, I'm not interested if the first thing he's talking about is NIL money. I'm not interested, because he's not invested. He's not invested in the program. He's not invested in the culture. He's not invested in his teammates. And so it's it's out there. It's out there. There are players who, get on campus, have a productive year, and then are like, okay, where's the NIL opportunity, folks? And
right.
And then the collective rallies and says, okay, well, how about doing some of this, and we'll give you some of that.
Yeah.
And that's more the way it should be.
Right.
Rather than, I had a lawmaker say that Quinn Ewers got $1.4 million in NIL money to go to Ohio State. The guy who wrote the bill that's going through the legislature right now that would allow high schoolers to receive NIL money in the state of Texas said that. And he's from that, South Lake area where Quinn's from. And, I don't think Quinn wants to even talk about that, and since he's been at Texas, he's been real, and I don't know what car he's driving this week, but, he's not wanted to talk about it. And I think that he's, all about the culture of being a teammate and trying to elevate the program. And I think Steve Sarkisian feels really good about the fact that he's been able to bring in a top flight quarterback each year. And in the Quinn Ewers, Malik Murphy case too, in the same year. And he said, we're going to continue to recruit the best quarterbacks to come here, because they push each other, and they they get their opportunity to compete and try and beat, the other guys out. He said of Malik Murphy and Arch Manning, I know he said, Quinn, barring something crazy happening, is what he said, Quinn Ewers will be our starter. He said that's not to say that Malik Murphy and Arch Manning aren't going to, push him to the brink and, try and overtake him. And they should.
Yeah.
And, he said we finally have seen Malik Murphy healthy, and he looked really good in the spring game. So, that's the one that Malik Murphy deserves a little credit here, because trust me, his people got calls about, hey, any second thoughts? Because we got some NIL opportunity over here. and Malik Murphy is staying true to Texas and staying true to what brought him to Texas. So that kid deserves a big pat on the back, and he's got a lot of confidence too. So loaded quarterback room.
It is. And he deserves a big pat on the back, knowing that Steve Sarkisian told Malik Murphy, who was verbally committed to Texas at the time, that they were going to try to go to the transfer portal to get a quarterback that was, obviously Quinn Ewers is the one that they were pointing to. And Malik Murphy was like,
well, I think, Malik Murphy is one of these guys who he's so big, he's so strong, and has so much confidence. He's not afraid. He is not afraid. And I think he's got blinders on. And I'm just saying, don't count this kid out at all. Because if you give him a door to get in, he may never leave. So it's going to be fun to watch. And you got to have talent in your quarterback room more than just your starter. So we know that. All right, Taylor, some other.
Can you see me back? I'm sorry, guys. I have no idea what happened. I'm glad the stream was still going, but my browser thing said something's wrong. But you were still good, so I think.
Yeah, it took me a second. Once I saw the clock was still going, I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll talk."
Sorry, but I have no clue what just happened because I've had internet. That's really weird, but.
Well, let's go to some comments over here. Yeah, we want Bama for real in week 2. Yeah, this is here's one that says mark the fact that Texas almost won back-to-back natties in 08 and 09 with crappy O-lines and running backs. Okay, well, I'm sure those guys really appreciate that comment. Adam Ulatowski, Kyle Hicks, Michael Huey. I wouldn't say crappy. I mean, they struggled at times. They certainly struggled against Ndamukong Suh and Jared Crick.
Oh, gosh.
When Colt McCoy was thrown all over Cowboys Jerry World. But yeah, it proves that Colt McCoy was that dude. And now we're waiting to see if Quinn Ewers, Malik Murphy, or Arch Manning is that dude. Someone did ask Sark about, what precipitated Quinn Ewers cutting his mullet and trimming his beard. And Sarkisian said, coaching. They said, no, just kidding. He said, but he said he did, talk to Quinn and said, I don't want your appearance to precede you. Meaning that if people look at you and see you and the way you look, for them to draw conclusions about who you are and, let them get to know you for you. And he said he felt like Quinn took that to heart. Next time he saw him, no mullet, beard trimmed. And we know Quinn has been, working really hard, remaking his body. You can see that. And I know he's been working with a nutritionist. I've written about that in the Insider at horns247.com. And he's determined. I mean, he's absolutely determined. He said it after the spring game. I felt like I let most of the fans down. I don't want that to ever happen again. And so Sarkisian's got a hungry quarterback room. And let's see. This says, I after 13, let's just pull it up here. David Williams, after 13 years, I'll be sold on UT when they finally win a conference championship. I will say it's hard for me to believe there's been a starting roster with more talent at UT since the mid 2000s. And Taylor, you hit on that. I mean, we agree.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's the reason why we are speaking in a way about Texas football and expectations this offseason that's been different than any years past. I mean, there's been a lot of talent. I don't want it to come off like we are saying that Texas has had, the talent has been a bust or that hasn't been good or anything. There has been talented players to come through Texas in the last 10 years.
But the teams were always missing something.
Exactly. And more times than not, it was in the trenches. It was up front, the big uglies, the guys that, that don't really get the credit where credit is due. But there's a reason why the NFL pays a premium dollar amount for those guys when they're the elite of the elite. You have to win up front in order to win games in college football, especially if you're going into the SEC. And this is a good year for Texas to kind of, see what this team can be and how SEC ready it is. And I feel like there's, the sense of urgency is there both among the staff and the players, knowing that this is kind of a prove it, not just from, wanting to win the Big 12 in the final year that Texas is in it, but to prove if they can do that and say, this is why we are deserving of being in the best, conference in college football. And it wasn't just, them just wanting to add us for money only. I mean, I think they have to prove themselves before they get to the SEC. And a great way to prove yourself before then is winning the Big 12 championship this year. And I think they're set up to do so.
Yeah. A lot of momentum is riding on this season. I mean, Sark has not made many mistakes since the 5-7 season in terms of, coaching hires and recruiting out of the portal. And Sark did say yesterday to the Touchdown Club of Houston, he's not crazy about the second window for the transfer portal, the one that opened on April 15th and will close at the end of the month. He says that. So you're telling me that you're going to have players who've been through your winter conditioning program, your spring, know your schemes, know your signals, and can go get in the portal and go play for someone else. He's like, yeah, okay. I guess it cuts both ways, but Sark said he's only interested in going to the portal to fill a specific need. He doesn't want to ever think of the portal as the place to go to find his talent. He wants that to be high school and for it to be developed. And if there's a specific need or a special talent, which he alluded to, and A.D. Mitchell, the receiver at Georgia, who happens to be from Houston and has friends on the Texas roster and has a child in Houston and wanted to get back closer to home. That sometimes lends itself to going and grabbing an A.D. Mitchell out of the portal, Taylor. I mean, that guy's caught touchdown passes in 4 college football playoff games.
Yeah, I think you saw his at least how well he can catch the ball in the spring game with that one-handed, almost looked like an Odell Beckham Jr. type of catch, in the touchdown there. Yeah, I mean, that's what ideally I think that would be what every coach would want the portal to be used for, not necessarily to build a roster off of, but to fill the holes of your current roster. And Steve Sarkisian's done that better, I think, than probably anyone in the last. I mean, maybe that's too bold of a statement for me to say. It probably is. But he's up there with among the top, coaches to really be able to utilize the transfer portal in a way that is really beneficial and picking up, crucial players at key positions like Quinn Ewers, like Ryan Watts, like Jalen Catalon. I mean, that's a guy I know he has so many questions about his sustainability because of his injury history, but that's a player you risk the chance of maybe never having him be healthy in the event that you can actually use him because he's so good, and I think one thing too, Chip, with the way that, other states have kind of come into the state of Texas, other schools outside of the state have come into the state of Texas to recruit in here. I kind of feel like Steve Sarkisian has done a really good job in bringing some of those players that left the state back into the state of Texas, like, the Quinn Ewers, the Ryan Watts, Jalen Catalon, A.D. Mitchell, like has ties there. I mean, there's a lot of players that have left the state and come back. And it's hard not to wonder if Steve Sarkisian is kind of using that, as a benefit to Texas in recruiting some of these top players out of the transfer portal.
He is. He said he is.
Mm-hmm.
He said we're going to go into the portal, address a specific need, and usually there will be a tie back either to the state of Texas or to someone on our roster. So no doubt about it. And he's been pretty surgical in his ability to find talent in the transfer portal. Here's an interesting comment from Longhorn. In 2021, UT had Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, and they were 5-7. In 2022, they went 8-5. What changed? They had the great back. So what upgraded on the offense to help them go 8-4? There wasn't an upgrade on offense. The quarterback was a first-year player. It was the defense that upgraded tremendously in 2022 to help them, to the 8 wins. And so,
well, I think the offensive line too. The offensive line,
the offensive line
year was better, even though it was younger and more inexperienced. It was better than the offensive line Texas had in 2021, in my opinion.
And the running game was better. The running game clearly was better in 2022 than it was in 2021, and a big part of that was the offensive line. The passing game suffered, and that was because of the confidence loss that Quinn Ewers suffered starting with that Oklahoma State game. And Quinn Ewers played well the next week against K-State, especially in the first half. K-State ended up being the Big 12 champion. I like Quinn Ewers. I like the way he's battled and tried to be resilient. He hadn't seen 3 high safeties before Iowa State. That was a tough game, and he made plays when he had to make them. The 4th down touchdown pass to Xavier Worthy. Remember that, because Iowa State was driving to win the game when Anthony Cook slams into Hunter Deckers and forces the fumble that Jalen Ford recovers right there in Texas's end of the field late in the game. So that defense came up big, and I think everything goes up. And part of the reason Steve Sarkisian's bullish about it is because he's got coaching retention. All of his defensive coaches have stayed, and he's had to change out a receiver coach the last 2 years. He brought in Tashard Choice 2 years ago. Tashard Choice is a rising star. So I think that's why people are bullish on Texas.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember, talking about Quinn Ewers and the first time seeing that 3 high safety look. I remember my father-in-law, who's a 30-year plus coach in the state of Texas, had said, he was like, I've seen all these people, questioning what happened to Quinn Ewers. Is he just like that injury shook him or something like that? He's like, you want to know what happened to Quinn Ewers in those games? That's the first time Quinn Ewers ever seen that defense. He's like, there's a big difference in facing that type of defense, especially if you've never seen it and you don't see it in the high school ranks. That's not how high school, especially at least in the state of Texas, he said, no high school defenses play that way. So it was a first for him. And what you hope to see is he learns from it, and it seems like everything else that had been a first, even just the way he approached studying and being in the film room and preparing as a starter, that was all a first for him last year, but he is preparing, from all accounts that we've heard, like a pro this year. So it'll be interesting to see kind of once he does face maybe a type of defense like Iowa State runs or something next season, how he does, because that'll be a measuring stick of really how much he is progressing from year 1 to year 2, in my opinion.
Yeah, if I'm Quinn Ewers, I'm studying those defenses like crazy right now and all summer long, because we've got a lot of comments here about Alabama in week 2 and the fact that Texas is going to know. And Steve Sarkisian, I asked him, I said, does having Alabama in week 2 help to manage your team from getting too high on itself? Because everyone's loving them up right now, telling them they're the favorite to win the Big 12. But yet you got Alabama in week 2. And he said, yeah. I mean, third week of training camp. He said, you throw that Alabama out there. They're training. Their training is harder, probably harder than you are right now. So what are you going to do about it? And so, that's one of the pluses to having those big marquee non-conference games, Taylor, is that, man, they grab your players' attention through the summer and through fall camp to be on point. If they were just playing Rice and, Louisiana Monroe, there'd be a real, chance of guys getting fat and happy.
Yeah, maybe enter like top 5 in the, rankings or something if they are looking good against those opponents. Yeah, no, I mean, this is why you want to schedule, and this is why you schedule those games early on too, because regardless, in my opinion, regardless of how Texas plays against Alabama, the outcome of that game, it does not in any way erase Texas from the picture of potentially, being one of the 4 teams in the college football playoff. And it doesn't impact at all the Texas chances of, playing for a Big 12 title. So, but it's good to get those out of the way, because you have so many weeks to prove yourself from there, especially if you don't have a good game against Alabama, to prove to the voters, here we are. But it's a good measuring stick for sure. I mean, what's your take? It's so early, it's hard to say this. Do you like Texas' chances against Alabama?
I do. I mean, Alabama just rated Notre Dame for a quarterback. I mean, that tells me they are not sold on Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe, who was a Texas commitment, had to play for Alabama last year and did a lot of damage with his legs. Now Bill O'Brien just left as the offensive coordinator to go back to the New England Patriots. And so Saban once again, and the guy's a master because he has won, season after season with teams rating his staff for head coaches, Kirby Smart, Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, and Jimbo. I mean, God, the list goes on, and he's had to replace him, and he keeps winning. And that's a testament to Saban's culture. But I don't know that they have the lethal quarterback after Bryce Young. So I think Texas is in that game. Absolutely. And I think I want to see how the running back situation is shaping up in fall camp. I think Jonathan Brooks is a really talented dude. I think it's his job to lose. I just want to make sure he's back and healthy and looking as good as he's looked in the past. Otherwise, I think it can be that could enter into Sarkisian's thinking about how he calls the games. If he knows he's got a running back he can count on to go get 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, then he'll run it twice and play 4 downs if he's on the opponent's side of the field. If he doesn't have that guy who can go get 3rd and 2 or 4th and 1, well, then he starts throwing the ball a lot. And look, he may have the quarterback and the receivers to do it. He did not last year. He may have it this year, but that's a tricky way to live. We know that. Art Briles changed from the air raid to the bear raid, where he, moved the receivers way out to almost to the sidelines so that he could run the football against a light box, because he got tired of trying to throw it 60 times a game to win championships. And so nonetheless, you got to be able to run the football. and we'll see. Other than that, Taylor, I like this team. And Sarkisian talked about the defense. The players he mentioned when asked at the Touchdown Club of Houston: Jalen Ford, Jahdae Barron, Barron Sorrell, Ryan Watts. Those were the 4 players that were top of mind for him. And I make a big deal about that. Like when we ask a coach a question, who's standing out? I asked him the question about who's rushed the passer well this spring. And he said, the first 2 names, that popped into his head were Byron Murphy and Anthony Hill.
Right.
Okay. We know he loves Barron Sorrell, but now he's talking about Byron Murphy and Anthony Hill. Okay. All right. I'm filing that away.
Yeah.
Anthony Hill's going to be a factor in this thing. So, and he said yesterday, Anthony Hill's going to be a star. That's what he said.
Yeah. So. Chip, you're like so excited. You're like, yes, he said my 2023 man crush Anthony Hill is going to be a factor.
I just like watching that kid knife through the line. And
I do too. Yeah.
Man, he studies the game. He knows where the play is going. He reads his keys. And for a freshman, we haven't seen an impact guy as a freshman, like a freak impact guy since Tony Brackens in 1993. He had 10 sacks as a freshman. Can Anthony Hill push that? Because Texas hasn't had a 10-sack guy since Jackson Jeffcoat in 2013.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's
Again,
right.
That's too many years, folks. All right, Taylor, are you ready for some love it or leave it?
I am. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a really quick break, but stay tuned. We have plenty more football talk and Bijan Robinson talk coming up. We'll be right back. And if you're watching us live here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will continue on here. All right, Chip, my first. Well, real quick here, there is a question. I just saw it now from Jeff. I apologize. I'm going to butcher your last name. Withhoon. Any concern for our 24 recruiting class? I haven't seen any significant names on the commit list recently. I feel like Texas had more momentum for the 23 class at this time last year. I mean, obviously, like Chip and I don't cover recruiting day in and day out like our guys, Mike Roach and Hudson Standish. They're the ones that know, that's why you subscribe to Horns 24/7. They have the VIP insight on that. But I will say, Texas momentum in recruiting in 2023, I think that at this point they had more verbal commitments, but it really didn't take off until Arch Manning committed in June. In the summertime. And I think it was like late June that he committed. And then that is where everything just really kind of the snowball effect started from there. I don't want to misspeak. I think Texas has fewer commits right now than they did at this time last year. But there are, this is kind of the evaluation period for the recruiting cycle. Coaches are going to be more able to see players on the road. There's going to be a visit period coming up too in June. So there's a lot coming up still, but I think they're a little behind.
And they're also going after the best players at their position in the nation. And those kids don't like to commit early. Most of them.
Right.
Some of them do. Arch Manning, he was over the recruiting process. He committed in June, but you're in on Jarek Gibson, the number 1 running back in the nation. You're in on Micah, the top receiver in the nation. So look,
Micah Hudson.
So you're some of these kids are not gonna, they're not gonna rush it. They want to take it all in, make an informed decision. They don't have to pull the trigger till December. So don't get too caught up in that. And I know there was an offensive lineman, Blake Frazier, from the state of Texas, who, committed to Michigan. His dad played at Michigan. So sometimes there's a reason that that a kid who's, super talented from your state commits somewhere else. Oh, his dad played there.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. All right.
Taylor.
Ready for love it or leave it? Sorry, I saw that one and I wanted to
it's good.
Get to it. So, all right. Love it or leave it, number 1 for you. Love it or leave it. You appreciate that Steve Sarkisian is talking publicly about how his players expect to win the Big 12 championship in Texas' final year in the conference.
I absolutely love this. I think the fact that Steve Sarkisian said about 3 times yesterday, we have to be intentional about going after this championship. We need to talk about it because we need to prepare as if we're going to win this championship. And I like that. I mean, some coaches don't want to, I don't want to get ahead of myself, or what? You're going to draw a bigger target on Texas?
Yeah.
Come on, man. They're going to the SEC. The Big 12 hates them. They want you don't think Houston wants to cook some Bevo burgers down at Cougar High in when they meet up? I mean, look, Sark knows we're already the biggest game on everyone's schedule. Let's be intentional about trying to win the championship. And let me get these guys who are, and I can't help but think, Taylor, when he talks about Malik Murphy, we need him to stay healthy, that he's going back to that damn scooter accident from last year during the season, 21, when he had the broken ankle, and then he's recovering from the broken ankle, and then he gets in the scooter accident and he, messes up his wrist. That's Sark saying, be a professional. Don't put yourself in dumb situations. I don't want to see you guys jumping off the cliff into the water out at Lake Austin,
Yeah.
Like, prepare for a championship. Be intentional. I love this. How about you?
Yeah, I love it too. And I agree. And as somebody who was in a scooter accident, there was a reason why I told Bijan Robinson, 2 years ago when I saw him in a scooter, I was like, Bijan, I want to kick that over right now. It's like, I was in an accident and I was fortunate and it sucked. You are worth way more money than I would ever be worth. Like, get your butt off of that scooter. I guess he upgraded to a Lamborghini, but yeah, no, I like it. I do like the kind of intentional call out without intentionally calling players out, specifically, because you're right. If you're Malik Murphy, he has to prepare like a pro, and preparing like a pro, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, maybe not do the fun things like riding scooters, or as you said, jumping off the cliffs or anything like that. Because you never know when your number is going to be called. And Malik Murphy witnessed a backup quarterback's number being called last year and needing to be ready. And so from everything we know about Malik Murphy, I would be shocked if that message has not landed very firmly in him. Yeah, he got the message. So all that
message.
Yeah.
And by the way, I found out what happened to his foot right before spring football. He got stepped on when they're like running through their those pseudo practices, and it got him, he got a cleat right in the wrong spot. So that wasn't his fault. The scooter thing, though, I think Sark is like, don't jeopardize. All right. Love it or leave it. Number 2.
Second one, love it or leave it. It was a good move by Sarkisian to also talk publicly about how Arch Manning was promised, quote, $0 NIL dollars as part of his recruitment.
Yeah, I'm going to love this too, because, all you hear at Texas A&M is that, these kids got promised a bunch of NIL opportunity, and then the money wasn't coming through. And the players were basically like, we're on strike till we get our money. I mean, they're smoking weed in the locker room. They don't care.
Yeah.
Where's my money? And that's the problem. And that's what Sark's talking about. I mean, if you come for the money, you're not invested in the team. You're not invested in, your teammates.
Right.
And it's about you. And so I think this was a smart thing, because like you said earlier in the show, Taylor, everyone had this assumption that, oh my God, Arch Manning's going to cost him a fortune. And, no, $0. I love this. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we knew all along. It was almost like it became a running joke. I mean, honestly, the amount of times I would just like shake my head when I saw people make those comments, even other like writers and reporters, like insinuating that played a role. It's like, you are just showing me that you don't know what actually played a role in this, because it had nothing to do with it. So I'm glad that Steve Sarkisian publicly debunked it. I guess Cooper Manning did as well as mentioning that story too. So yeah, I mean, this was the truth all along. We were not lying. We were not trying to just pass along Texas message and saying that it wasn't about NIL with Arch Manning. This was the real story. And so I'm glad that Steve Sarkisian had a platform to debunk it in such a public manner.
Yeah. All right, good. Love it or leave it. Number 3.
All right. Last one for you. Love it or leave it. Bijan Robinson will go down as Texas' best running back in the NFL since Jamal Charles.
I'm not going to put a ceiling on this, so I'm going to leave this and say Bijan Robinson could go down as Texas's best running back ever in the NFL. He has that kind of toolbox. And so I'm not saying he will, because you got to have health, you got to have longevity, you got to go to a good team, a team that values you, a team that uses you the right way. Some would argue that Earl Campbell going to the Houston Oilers was maybe the worst thing that could have happened to him, because Bum Phillips, the head coach, handed him the ball 30 times a game and, just put Earl Campbell in a car accident every play. And so Earl had, he played 78 to 85. He played 7 years. Whereas, Ricky Williams ends up playing 12 years, and on and on. So you need all those things to happen. You need fortune. But Bijan Robinson is a godly guy. He says God's going to put me right where I'm supposed to be. Well, hell, who am I to second guess God? Yeah. God's going to put Bijan Robinson, might put him right on the Eagles playing for a Super Bowl next year. Because again, we're recording before the draft on Thursday. If you're listening to this after Thursday, but I'm going to leave this, Taylor. I think Bijan could surpass them all. Your thoughts?
I'm kind of annoyed that you said that, because I for sure thought you were going to be like, oh, love it every day. And I was be like, I'm going to leave it because I think he has a higher ceiling than just comparing him to Jamal Charles. Yeah. So I was not expecting that answer from you. But yeah, no, I will leave it in the fact that I have higher expectations for Bijan Robinson, mainly because he's in a category of his own. I will say that. And as you mentioned, it's a great point about, everything has to kind of go your way, whether it's, the coach you're playing for, the type of offense that you're in, the philosophy of utilizing a running back, the philosophy of utilizing a running back in multiple ways, like what Bijan Robinson provides that some other just true traditional running backs do not provide. Vince Young is an example of somebody who went to a team that was just the wrong fit from the beginning, and he couldn't really ever fix it, and I mean, I think that was a little different. I do think with Vince, his talents and skills were a little bit premature for the NFL at the time. Had he been drafted like 5 years later, I think Vince Young would have had a much longer NFL career, just because the league wasn't really about pro style or about, dual threat quarterbacks or running quarterbacks like what Vince Young was so good at.
But you're right too. Jeff Fisher as a coach was the quarterback killer.
Yeah.
I mean, he killed a bunch of quarterback careers.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think so long as all of that works, and Bijan is put in a place that is going to utilize all of the weapons that he does provide, I think he has a higher ceiling than Jamal Charles, and I would say probably Cedric Benson, Ricky Williams. He doesn't partake in the partying, I think, too, which helps him. So that's something that also goes his way.
Texas's NFL leading running back in terms of receptions is Ricky Williams with 342. I will take the over for Bijan Robinson when it's all said and done. All right, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff. Appreciate y'all tuning into the Flagship Podcast. We like doing these live shows. We'll do more of them. I hope.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
they're fun too. You know what I'm saying?
They are fun.
But yeah, thanks for all the questions, everybody. And make sure you're getting over to horns247.com. We broke the story about the new indoor outdoor football practice facility more than a year ago.
Yeah. Just
Texas
been talking
announced
about
it.
it.
Yeah, Texas announced it a week ago. We've been talking about it for a year. Told you
At
exactly.
least. Yeah.
Told you exactly where it was going to go. Told you why it was going to go there, and now and we're the only ones reporting that it's probably not going to be constructed until the end of 25 or early 26. But hey, it's coming. And apparently, Mac Brown was walking around the complex Tuesday. Taylor, he's got that Mac, Jack, and McConaughey event.
Yeah.
They have Garth Brooks playing at freaking Moody Theater. How about Garth Brooks in a 2,500 seat venue?
How do you get tickets to that? I don't know how
please.
that works.
But Mac, was like taking in the South End for the first time and looking at the plans for the new practice facility. And Mac's like, oh, they're getting rid of that bubble finally. Mac wanted that thing gone after they won the national. I think it was constructed in like 2000, and Mac wanted it gone after the national championship. He's like, okay, let's go. Let's get some new practice facilities. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff, everybody. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.